Adonai Sivos Ashrei Adam Boteach Bag Adonai Hoshia Hamelech Yonenu B'Yom Koreinu La Yehudim Haisa Hoira V'Simcha V'Sason V'Hikar Kein Tiyeh Lanu Kais Yeshuos Esau V'Shem Adonai Ekra. Ay ya da 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 dum bum bum ba da dum bum 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 ba da ba dum la 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 da 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 dum ba da dum bum ba da 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 dum. A good vach, Shavua Tov, a good week to you, my holy sisters and brothers. It's great to be learning with you on a Saturday night. Very impressed with the people on the East Coast. As we get into the summer, it just gets so late for you guys. If you're watching this live, wow, shkoyak, may you be strengthened in your pursuit of Torah. Let's light up the darkness. We got a barnstormer of a daf tonight, another beauty. You know, we need to catch up a few pages. I believe we're 6 pages behind coming out of Passover, but we just can't skip this material. It's so, juicy and full of narrative insight about the Torah, unusual interpretations, stories. Tonight we're going to be talking about Miriam and Caleb in the story of Moses. Very timely that we're studying this now. It's just great. And for those who are counting, I'll just say that last night, right? Saturday night. So Friday night, we counted 9 nights. And so this night, we counted the one after that. I don't want to say it. So just in case you're not ready to count, but, because you want to, and you're saying it with the bracha. We count the days from Passover to Shavuos, 49 days. We count each night, and it's a mitzvah, so we say the blessing before we do the counting, but you got to stay with it, right? If you miss one of the nights, you can keep counting, but then you say it without the blessing. And you don't want to, say the number of the day until you're ready to count and say the blessing. There's lots of apps and, help like at Chabad.org. There's a great Sephiros Omer, right? Counting the Omer, like a counter. There's an app. There's a website. There's lots of different ways to do it. Lots of beautiful meditations. On this day, I think it's, it's a Tiferes of Gevura. So kind of like the harmony aspect of, imposing or, you want to have good judgment in your life, and judgment balances out chesed, mercy, loving kindness, right? These are forces that balance each other, loving kindness and good judgment or restraint. And when you achieve that balance, that's tiferet, harmony. These are the kinds of meditations that you have about counting the Omer as we meditate on the attributes of God and ask ourselves, are we embodying those attributes in our lives? We could do a whole lesson on the Omer another time, but I highly encourage you to look up counting the Omer if you're not already doing it and you're Jewish. Okay, so let's get going here. Our daf tonight is Yud Beis, page 12 here in Tractate Sotah, the 18th volume of the Talmud. We're in chapter 1, continuing our discussion of Mishna number 6. Generally speaking, in this Mishnah, we're talking about that God both punishes and rewards measure for measure, and seeing a bunch of examples in the Torah of people being rewarded or punished measure for measure according to their deeds. And we learned that the midwives in Egypt, at the time that the children of Israel were enslaved in Egypt, and Pharaoh had heard from his astrologers and necromancers that one who would arise to challenge him and free the children of Israel from slavery and defeat Pharaoh, would come from water, be stricken with water, etc. And that led to the decree of all the Jewish boys being drowned in the Nile River. But Moses was saved from that fate by his mother, who put him in the basket, as we will be reading about today. But prior to that happening, the midwives refused to do Pharaoh's dirty work for him, killing the Jewish baby boys. And they were rewarded for that. So the midwives named in the Torah Shifra and Puah, but we saw an interpretation here that says, well, those were kind of code names for them, which helped us understand their attributes, but really who they were was Yocheved, Moses' mother, and Miriam, Moses' sister. And so it says that about Shifra and Puah, that God rewarded them by building houses for them. And we're continuing our discussion of what it means that houses were built for them. Right? So we learned at the end of yesterday about Caleb. Right? So we just finished by saying yesterday, and the one who says that it is referring to houses of royalty. Right? Because one says that the houses built for Shifra and Puah, who are actually Yocheved, Moses' mother, and Miriam, Moses' sister. One says that they built houses of the priesthood, which makes sense, right? Because Yocheved's sons were Moshe and Aaron, and Aaron's descendants are the priesthood. What does it mean, the one who says, a different sage says, that the houses that were built for them were of royalty, that they were the ancestors of royalty? And the one who says that it is referring to houses of royalty, well, this is referring to King David, who also comes from Miriam. Now, how is King David descended from Moses' sister Miriam? As it is written, and Azubah, the wife of Caleb, right? So Joshua and Caleb, were two prominent leaders of the children of Israel in the desert, sort of assistants to Moses, but leaders of their tribes. And they went with the other 10 spies, right, to spy out the land many years later when it was, sometime later after receiving the Torah. And these are the spies who 10 of them brought back a report that the land is beautiful, but it's inhabited by giants and we won't be able to enter it, which is ridiculous, right? God brought them out of Egypt with great signs and wonders, gave them the Torah, fed them with manna. Obviously, God could do whatever he wanted. Like, to bring in such a report of doubt and fear and to spread fear and dissension among the people was a big sin. And that's when God said, this generation is not ready to enter the promised land. And that's what led to wandering in the desert, for those 38 extra years. Now, Caleb and Joshua did not participate in bringing that fear and dissension. So this Caleb that we're talking about, now we're being told that he was Miriam's husband, right? And Azubah, the wife of Caleb, died, and Caleb took to him Ephrat, who bore him Hur. And as will be explained further, Ephrat is Miriam, right? So again, we have this, very often we're going to see this, that the sages will take two different characters in the Torah or in the Bible and say they're actually the same person. And then we ask, well, why do they have different names? And then they'll give you an explanation for that, right? So Ephrat, who bore him Hur, right? I think he was killed in the episode of the Golden Calf when the revelers, didn't want to be denied, having an idol, not to stand in for God, but to stand in for Moses. Different episode. But at any rate, this Caleb's son was Hur, and his wife, after his first wife was Azubah, and the second wife was Ephrat, who bore him Hur. And as will be explained further, Ephrat is Miriam. And it is written, David was the son of the Ephrathite of Bethlehem in Judah. Therefore, he was a descendant of Miriam. And the Gemara discusses the family of Caleb, or Caleb, I guess in English is better. In Chronicles it says, and Caleb, the son of Hezron, begot children of Azubah, his wife, and of Jerioth. And these were her sons, Jesher, Shobab, and Ardon. 1 Chronicles 2:18. Now the Gemara asks, was Caleb actually the son of Hezron? Wasn't he the son of Jephunneh? As the verse states in Numbers 13:6. So the Gemara answers, he was the son of Hezron, but he is called the son of Jephunneh as an appellation indicating that he was a son who turned away, Shephanah, from the council of the spies, the other 10 spies. Now the Gemara asks, and now we read yesterday, now we're starting at the very bottom of 11b. The Gemara asks, but it is still difficult. Hezron could not be his father. as Caleb was the son of Kenaz, as it is written, and Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother, took it. And that was Judges 1:13. And this would mean that Caleb was also a son of Kenaz. So Rava said Caleb was the stepson of Kenaz, as he and Othniel shared a mother but had different fathers. So the Gemara comments, the language of another verse is also precise based on this explanation, as it is written, and Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, said unto him, at Joshua 14:6. So although his father was Jephunneh, he was known as the Kenizzite, although he was not actually a son of Kenaz. And the Gemara accepts this proof and states, conclude from it, that Rava's explanation is correct. Now, what we're getting at is what the relationship between Caleb and Miriam, right? That's the importance here. So the verse states, and Caleb, the son of Hezron, begot children of Azubah, his wife, and Jerioth. And these were her sons, Jesher and Shobab and Ardon. So the Gemara analyzes the verse. The verse refers to the wife of Caleb by the name Azubah. That seems to be the first wife. And the sages teach that this is Miriam. Now, didn't they just say that he was married to Azubah, she died, and then he married Ephrat, and Ephrat is actually Miriam. But other sages teach that Azubah is Miriam. And why is she called Azubah? As everyone initially abandoned her, Azubah, and did not want to marry her because she was sickly and unattractive. Now listen to this amazing story about Miriam. It starts here, right in the beginning, that because she was sickly and pallid, and there was something about her, both physically and kind of her air, that made her very unattractive. This will change. Right, so the sages teach that this is Miriam. And why is she called Azubah? As everyone initially abandoned her, Azavuha, and did not want to marry her because she was sickly and unattractive. So the verse additionally states, and Caleb, the son of Hezron, begot children, Holid, of Azubah, his wife. 1 Chronicles 2:18. So the Gemara asks, why use the term Holid, begot children? But doesn't this verse state that he married her? And Rabbi Yochanan says this teaches us that with regard to anyone who marries a woman for the sake of heaven, as he married her due to her righteousness without concern for her appearance, the verse ascribes him credit as if he gave birth to her, right? It's like he gave her life. Now, the same verse refers to Miriam additionally as Jerioth, which the Gemara explains was appropriate, for her face was like extremely pallid curtains, Yeriot. So here they're saying that even in the first case, where it seems that he had two wives by the names of Azubah and Jerioth, that both names refer to the same woman, and she is Miriam, according to this interpretation. So the verse continues, and these were her sons, Vaneha. And the Gemara explains, do not read it as Vaneha, her sons, rather read it as Bonecha, her builders. And we see this, we actually say it every day in the prayer book, that our children, the next generation that we want to transmit our Torah values to them, they are actually our builders, right? That they build the Jewish tradition into the future. So in other words, the rest of the names in the verse are not the names of her children, but rather appellations for her husband, whose marriage to her built her, as it were. Are you getting this? Now they're saying that this guy who married a woman that everyone else found unattractive, and so she was destined, the way things were going, not to bear seed. But her husband saw past the physicality and realized she was a righteous, good, upstanding, wonderful person. He married her and gave her life that way. And so then the names which follow, which appear to be names of her children, are actually other names of her husband because he gave her life in this way, according to this interpretation. Right? So the first appellation of this husband, Caleb, right? Caleb from the story, is Jesher, and this refers to his actions as he set himself straight, Yesher, and did not join in the council of the spies in that episode we mentioned earlier. And the second appellation, Shobab, is referring to the fact that he broke, Sibev, his evil inclination by rebelling against the other spies. And the third appellation, right, the third name that is given for him, Ardon, as in Ve'ardon, is referring to the fact that he ruled Radah over his evil inclination. And some say because the face of his wife Miriam became beautiful like a rose, vered, after they were married, and she was also called Vardon due to her rose-like complexion, right? It wasn't that she was physically unattractive. It was that, you could imagine what she had been through, the traumas that she had been through in her own family. Very difficult upbringing. All the Jewish people were traumatized by the enslavement and the mass genocide of killing, untold number of Jewish baby boys. She managed to save her brother, but he was still taken away from the family and raised in the palace. All kinds of things could have interfered, with her joyful outlook. Nonetheless, at a certain point, she found, love, but found love with somebody who shared values with her. It wasn't like, romantic comedy, meet cute type of love. It was people who shared values and built a home, and then they both blossomed. And in blossoming together and building a home together, their very appearance was transformed and became radiant and extremely attractive. Very interesting. Now, and it's so funny that we're reading this page today because a friend of mine named Morris, a fellow in his, I think he must be in his 70s, and he today sponsored our Kiddush in synagogue in memory of his mother, right? So his mother was a righteous hero. They were part of one of the early waves of religious Jews emigrating to Israel. In kind of the early days when there was very, very little infrastructure there in Jerusalem. She was living in the religious neighborhood, Mea Sharim. And it was like their whole family fit, in an apartment about the size of this office. I think it said 70 square meters. Whatever that is. I don't think it's square meters, but it's a very small apartment. And she sort of gathered scraps from the market and made a soup every day to feed the homeless. It was like she just personally ran a soup kitchen, and they themselves were poor, but she did it anyway. Ended up taking in an old man who had lost everyone in the Holocaust and giving him a home so he wouldn't have to sleep in the synagogue. This woman was so heroic. And there was a boy who, as Morris put it, was not well. Somehow he was not well. There was something about him that was not well, and could not get married. And so it was not only he couldn't get married, but it was making it difficult for his family to get married. So she took him into their house, and then she took it upon herself to make a shidduch for him, to find him a wife. So finally, she found the girl, who was, not the most beautiful girl in Jerusalem, and said, "You should marry this guy." And she looked at the guy, and he was like, not well, whatever that meant. And she said, no way. And, this was from another time, okay? This is what she then did and said would probably not work in 2023. But in 1950, whatever, she took the girl to a mirror and said, "Look, honey, you're not that beautiful. Yitzi, this guy is a good match for you. Let's be honest, the two of you can build a home together." And it worked. It was a convincing enough talk. So this couple got married. They ended up having 8 kids, dozens and dozens of grandchildren, among them Torah scholars, entrepreneurs, huge families. Just a whole world of people that came out of this match of 2 people who might not have, ended up finding matches otherwise. It's just one of the many things that this mother did, right? And they built a beautiful, wonderful home together, right? So in America, I think very often, I can think of friends of mine who are so hung up on the outer appearance and trying to get the person, who is at the level of handsomeness or beauty that they think they want or are entitled to, and they end up never getting married. I just actually have seen that happen, people that I know. And it's a huge mistake, right? So, when you set out in life, highly recommended to get married if you can, if it all makes sense for you, and build a home. And what should you build it on? Not surface features, but shared values. A home built on shared values will prosper. At any rate, So the Gemara interprets an additional verse referring to Caleb. As it is stated, and Asher, the father of Tekoa, had two wives, Helah and Nara. Asher is Caleb. And why was he called Asher? Because his face became blackened, hushacharu, from the extensive fasts that he accepted upon himself so that he would not be entrapped by the counsel of the spies. And the father of is also referring to Caleb, as he became like a father to his wife. As we saw, he built her up. And the next word in the verse, Tekoa, is an additional reference to Caleb, as he attached Tekah, his heart, to his father in heaven. Now, the phrase in the verse, had two wives, actually means it is as if Miriam became like two wives, because she changed over the course of time. And therefore, the two names written in the verse, Helah and Nara, were not two separate women, Helah and Nara. Rather, initially, Miriam was sickly, Helah, and forlorn, and ultimately, she was healthy and beautiful like a young woman, Nara. So the verse expounds the following verses referring to Miriam. And the children of Helah, right, were Zeret, and Zohar, and Etnan. 1 Chronicles 4:7. So she was now called Zeret, for she became so beautiful that she was like a rival, Tzara, to other women, as they were jealous of her beauty. And she is called Zohar, as her first shined like the sun does at noon, Soharayim. And she is called Esnan, as any man that saw her would be aroused so much that he would bring a gift, Esnan, to his own wife to entice her, right? Now, I will definitely say, I happen to have lucked out. I happen to have an incredibly beautiful wife. But I will just say that as a general matter, all people who can find it in themselves to smile become double attractive, right? Whatever your attractive level is, if you can smile at other people and find what to be grateful for in this world, your attractiveness level goes up big time. Now, the Gemara returns to the discussion of the bondage in Egypt. Now, we're back to breaking down how the Jews became enslaved in Egypt. And Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, every son that is born you shall cast into the river, and every daughter you shall save alive. Exodus 1:22. Now, Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rabbi Hanina, says, the use of the phrase, every son that is born, indicates that he decreed even on his own nation that all their male babies must be killed. And Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rabbi Hanina, says further, he decreed 3 decrees. Initially, he commanded the midwives only with regard to Jewish infants. You shall look upon the stones. If it be a son, then you shall kill him. But if it be a daughter, then she shall live. Right? This is how we got into the discussion of the midwives. He's saying it to them. And afterwards, he decreed with regard to the Jewish infants, every son that is born you shall cast into the river. And ultimately, according to this reading, he decreed even on his own nation that Egyptian infant boys should be cast into the river as well, because he was just covering all his bases where he had received this prophecy from his astrologers that a boy born around this time would end up deposing him, right? You can never fight those kinds of foretellings, right? Throughout literature, we see people try to, change fate in that kind of a situation, and it never works. So the verse states, and there went a man of the house of Levi and took for a wife a daughter of Levi. Exodus 2:1. And the Gemara asks, to where did he go? And Rabbi Yehuda Bar Zavina says he went according to the advice of his daughter, Miriam. Right? We're still talking about Miriam, as the Gemara will explain. And a sage teaches, Amram, the father of Moses, was the Gadol, the great man of his generation. And once he saw that the wicked Pharaoh said, every son that is born you shall cast into the river, and every daughter you shall save alive, so he said, we are laboring for nothing by bringing children into the world only to be killed. Therefore, he arose and divorced his wife. And all others who saw this followed his example and arose and divorced their wives. Now his daughter Miriam said to him, Father, your decree, this very, very famous passage, it gets cited all the time in Jewish Torah study, Many, many Jews throughout Jewish history have not ever read the Talmud, have heard this passage, right? So his daughter Miriam said to him, "Father, your decree is more harsh for the Jewish people than that of Pharaoh, as Pharaoh decreed only with regard to the males, but you decreed both on the males and on the females. And now no children will be born." Right? So this teaching is used all the time to give people hope and strength, and to say, even in the darkest of times, look at the example of Miriam. Her father gave up, right? I mean, to bring a child into the world where Pharaoh's soldiers are just going to toss if he's a boy, he's going to toss him into the river. Let's not get married, and let's not go through that terrible, sadness. And his daughter said, yeah, but if you don't marry and have children, then not only will those boys not, survive, but the girls won't ever be born either. So, and additionally, also Pharaoh decreed to kill them only in this world, but you decreed in this world and in the world to come, as those not born will not enter the world to come, right? These babies, they won't have a human life, but they're souls that came into this world, and they'll have a place in the world to come. Plus, says Miriam, concerning Pharaoh the wicked, it is uncertain whether his decree will be fulfilled, and it is uncertain if his decree will not be fulfilled. You are a righteous person, and as such, your decrees will certainly be fulfilled. As it is stated with regard to the righteous, you shall also decree a thing, and it shall be established unto you. Job 22:28. Obviously, she didn't quote Job, but, the sages are quoting to illustrate her point. So Amram accepted his daughter's words, right? He took rebuke from his own daughter and arose and brought back. And his daughter was, I think, 6 years old, right? So he took rebuke. The Gadol, the great leader of the generation, took rebuke from his 6-year-old daughter, who was wise, one who learns from every person. So Amram accepted his daughter's words and arose and brought back, meaning remarried his wife Yocheved. And all the others who saw this followed his example and arose and brought back their wives, right? Even though they were probably destined to have this terrible sadness that the babies would be taken away and thrown in the river, it was not a certainty. The way it was a certainty, if you don't have children, then they will never exist. Now the Gemara asks, and obviously it was not a sure thing that the baby boys would die, because Moses did not. And even though many other baby boys were thrown in the river, Pharaoh did cancel the decree. And so the Gemara asks, if Amram remarried Yocheved, rather than say, and took for a wife a daughter of Levi, it should have stated, and returned for a wife the daughter of Levi. So Rav Yehuda Bar Zavina says he performed an act of marriage just as one would do for a first marriage. He sat her on a palanquin, an apirion, and Aaron and Miriam danced before her, and the ministering angels said, a joyful mother of children, right? Once he decided that they were going to reverse the divorce and get married again, he didn't do it as a half measure, right? He did it with all the bells and whistles, a joyous marriage, a joyous wedding, because all weddings are joyful. And the verse is referring to Yocheved as a daughter of Levi. So the Gemara asks, is it possible that this is Yocheved? Yocheved was then 130 years old, and the verse still calls her a daughter? Yocheved's age is established based on a tradition concerning the number of the descendants of Jacob who came to Egypt as follows. While the verse states that Leah had 33 descendants at Genesis 46:15, only 32 were enumerated. And this was explained as Rabbi Chama, the son of Rabbi Hanina, says, the daughter of Levi is Yocheved, whose conception was on the road, as the family of Jacob descended to Egypt, and she was born between the walls, meaning in Egypt, as it is stated, and the name of Amram's wife was Yocheved, the daughter of Levi, who was born to Levi in Egypt. She was conceived out of Egypt, but born in Egypt. Now, the interpolation concerning her birth is like this. Her birth was in Egypt, but her conception was not in Egypt. Since the Jewish people were in Egypt for 210 years, and Moses was 80 years old at the time of the Exodus, Yocheved was 130 years old when Moses was born. In light of this, the Gemara is asking how the verse can refer to her as a daughter. And Rabbi Yehuda says the signs of a young woman were born in her when her husband remarried her, and she became like a young girl again. Now the verse states concerning Moses, and the woman conceived and bore a son. And when she saw him, that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months. So the Gemara asks, but Yocheved was pregnant with Moses for 3 months at the outset, before Amram remarried her, as will be explained further. Interesting. He remarried her at Miriam's request, but actually she was already pregnant and didn't know it, I guess, when he divorced her. So she was already pregnant for 3 months when they remarried. We're going to understand why he says that in a moment. Now, Rav Yehuda Bar Zevina said the intention of the verse is to juxtapose her giving birth to her becoming pregnant. Now, just as her becoming pregnant was without pain, so too her giving birth was without pain. And from here it is derived concerning righteous women that they were not included in the verdict, pitka, of Eve, that a woman will suffer pain during childbirth. Now, just in case you're a woman who suffered pain during childbirth, they're not saying that you are not a righteous person. They're saying that there have been a few individuals in history among the many millions of the rest of us who were so righteous, so exceptional, that somehow, they were spared having pain at childbirth in the decree that was given to Eve, right, after the incident of the fruit in the Garden of Eden, etc. Right, but, it doesn't mean that, if you had pain in childbirth, you're doing something wrong in life. It's just that you're not one of the 1 in a million or 1 in a billion, 1 in 10 million, whatever that is, at that exalted level. Now, the verse states with regard to the birth of Moses, and the woman conceived and bore a son. And when she saw him that he was a goodly child, Tov, she hid him 3 months. It is taught in a Baraisa that Rabbi Meir says Tov is Moses' real name, as it was given to him by his parents when he was born. Right? Moses, or Moshe, was a name given to him by Basya, Pharaoh's daughter, when she took him out of the river. But he had a name before that when he was born, and that name was Tov, or Tovia. Right? Rabbi Yehuda says his name was Tovia. And Rabbi Nehemiah says they said he was good because they saw that he was fit for prophecy. They could tell he was a prophet immediately. Others say that he was good because he was born already circumcised. And the rabbis say at the time when Moses was born, the entire house was filled with light. As it is written here, and when she saw him that he was a goodly child, and it is written there, and God saw that the light, that it was good. Tov, the same word. So the whole house was filled with light. Now the verse continues, and she hid him 3 months. Exodus 2:2. So the Gemara explains that she was able to hide him for 3 months because the Egyptians counted the 9 months of her pregnancy only from the time her husband took her back. But she was pregnant with Moses for 3 months from the outset of her remarriage. It was noticed that this man remarried his wife, and so the Egyptians were on the lookout for a baby that might emerge for that, but they weren't thinking it was going to happen 6 months after the marriage because she was already 3 months pregnant. And and their next verse states, and when she could no longer hide him. So why couldn't she hide him any longer? Let her continue to hide him. Rather, anywhere that the Egyptians heard that a baby was born and they wanted to locate the baby, they would bring another baby there in order that it could be heard crying. And then the 2 babies would cry together, as it is written, take us the foxes, the little foxes that spoil the vineyards, for our vineyards are in blossom, from Song of Songs. And this is interpreted to mean that the infants who were used to uncover the hidden babies were referred to as little foxes. And the verse states, and when she could no longer hide him, she took for him an ark of bulrushes and daubed it with bitumen and with pitch. And she put the child therein and laid it in the willows by the river's bank. And the Gemara asks, what is different about bulrushes that she decided to use those to build her ark, her basket for the baby out of? And Rabbi Elazar says, from here it is derived concerning righteous people that their money is more precious to them than their bodies. Right? What did Sal just read? That righteous people, their money is more precious to them than their bodies? You would think, well, righteous people don't care about money. Righteous people care about doing righteous, holy things. But listen what the Gemara says about this. And why do righteous people care so much about their money? Because they do not stretch out their hands to partake of stolen property. They are meticulous to be sure that they never use something that is not their own, that is not properly their own. Therefore, their own property is very precious to them. Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani says an alternative reason for her taking bulrushes for the ark. She took a soft material like bulrush, which is able to withstand an impact both before a soft item and before a hard item. She feared that if she would have made the box from a hard material like wood, if it were to collide with a hard item in the water, it might break. And the verse continues, and daubed it with bitumen and with pitch. And the sage teaches she daubed bitumen on the interior and pitch on the exterior, so that righteous person, Moses, would not smell a foul odor such as that of pitch, which is, I guess, like tar. And the verse continues, and she put the child therein and laid it on the willows, basuf. And Rabbi Elazar says this means she placed him in the Suf Sea, meaning the Red Sea. And Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani says she placed him in a marsh, as it is written, the reeds and willows, Suf, shall wither, in Isaiah 19:6. We're on 12b. And the verse states, and the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe, lirchotz, in the river. Rabbi Yochanan says that in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, this teaches that she came down to the river to cleanse herself from the impurity of her father's idols, as she was immersing herself as part of the conversion process. She was already interested in becoming a Jewish woman. She was immersing in the river as a mikveh. And similarly, it states, and when the Lord shall have washed, rachatz, away the filth of the daughters of Zion, and shall have purged the blood of Jerusalem from the midst thereof by the spirit of judgment and by the spirit of destruction, Isaiah 4:4. This washing clearly refers to the purging of spiritual sins rather than bathing for the sake of cleanliness, right? So Pharaoh's daughter was already somehow repulsed by the idolatry of her father's palace. And the verse continues, and her maidens walked along, holechot, by the riverside. And Rabbi Yochanan says this walking is nothing other than the terminology of going to her death. And similarly, it states, behold, I am going, holech, to die, Genesis 25:32. And the verse states, and she saw the ark among the willows. Once her maidens saw that the daughter of Pharaoh was intending to save Moses, they said to her, right, her servants said to her, our mistress, the custom of the world is that when a king of flesh and blood issues a decree, even if all the world does not fulfill it, at least his own children and members of his household fulfill it, and yet you are violating the decree of your father, as you are taking this baby boy who's obviously one of the Hebrews that your father decreed should be drowned in the river, and you're going to rescue him. At least you would think that Pharaoh's daughter would follow Pharaoh's decree. Now, after the maidens tried to convince her not to save Moses, the angel Gabriel came and beat them to the ground, and they died. And the verse concludes, and she sent amata to take it. Exodus 2:5. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Nehemiah disagree as to the definition of the word amata. One says that it means her arm, and the other one says that it means her maidservant. And the Gemara explains, the one who says that it means her arm explained it in this manner, as it is written, amata, which denotes her forearm. And the one who says it means her maidservant explained it in this manner because it does not explicitly write the more common term for her hand, yada. Therefore, he understands that this is the alternative term for a maidservant, ama. And the Gemara asks, and according to the one who says that it means her maidservant, didn't you say earlier that Gabriel came and beat them to the ground and killed them? So how could Pharaoh's daughter send her maidservant? So the Gemara answers, it must be that Gabriel left her one maidservant, as it is not proper that a princess should stand alone. And the Gemara says, and according to the one who says that this word amata means her own hand or her arm, so let the Torah write explicitly, her hand, like she extended her hand to pull the boy out of the river. Why use the more unusual term amata? And the Gemara answers, this verse teaches us that her arm extended ishtarbav many cubits. As the master said in another context, and similarly you find with regard to the hand of Pharaoh's daughter, that it extended. And similarly you find with regard to the teeth of evildoers, as it is written, you have broken, shibarta, the teeth of the wicked. And Reish Lakish said, do not read the word as shibarta, rather read it as sheribavta, you have extended. Our Rav, Rabbi Kalmanson, has said many times, using this example of Pharaoh's daughter and this teaching from this Gemara, that when she reached out to bring in Moses, that this idea that her arm extended, meaning imagine that this is a swamp, like a marshy swamp, and it's very dangerous to walk out into that water. Who knows? Piranhas, quicksand, whatever, right? Impossible to just swim out there and get it. So the basket was too far away for her to rescue this child. She reached anyway. And miraculously, her arm extended and became long enough, like literally, like Stretch Armstrong, right? Her arm extended, became very long, and she was able to reach the basket. And Rabbi Kalmanson says, often in life, we encounter situations that are just impossible. We know, like, there's no way that I can solve this problem. And so the typical human reaction is, so I might as well not try. It's impossible to do it, so I might as well not try. The lesson from Pharaoh's daughter is, try anyway, right? The impossible task might be impossible, but you won't know until you try. So make that initial step anyway. And what you might find is that when you take that initial step, there's like a view that you'll have once you come a step closer to the problem that you didn't have when it just seemed so impossible from a step further back. Once you start working on the problem, you might find a path that allows you to get there. Okay. Where am I? She extended her arm. Yes. And the next verse states, and she opened it and saw it. Vatirehu, even the child. And the Gemara comments, the verse states, and she saw it. Now it should have stated, and she saw. So Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Hanina, says, in addition to Moses, she saw the divine presence with him. And this is indicated by the usage of saw it. So the verse states, and saw it, even the child, yell it, and behold, a lad, nar, that wept, right? So there's different terms being used for the baby inside, a baby, an infant, a child, a lad, right? Different terms meaning a youngster, but one indicating a baby, one like an infant, a toddler, a lad, which is like, it could be like a teen or a preteen. So what's going on here is what they're looking at. At least the terms nar and yeled, right? So the verse calls him a child, a yeled, and in the same verse calls him a lad, a nar. And the sage teaches he is the age of a child, a small child. I mean, he was just a few months old, right? But his voice is as loud and as deep as a lad. And this is the statement of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Nehemiah said to him, if that is so, you made Moses, our teacher, blemished, since his voice was unusually deep. Rather, this teaches that his mother made a canopy of youth, i.e. a small canopy, a chuppah, for him in the ark, as she said, perhaps I will not merit to see him married, at least I'll put him under a chuppah, a wedding canopy now, a little mini canopy. And the verse concludes, and she had compassion on him. Right, this is Pharaoh's daughter. And she had compassion on him and said, this, Zeh, is one of the Hebrews' children. And the Gemara asked, from where did she know that he was a Hebrew child? And Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rabbi Hanina, says, as she saw that the child was circumcised. And we learned earlier that it might be that Moses was born circumcised. And the Gemara comments that Pharaoh's daughter said, this, the word Zeh, is one of the Hebrews' children. Rabbi Yochanan says this teaches that she prophesied unknowingly, as the intention of the word Zeh was this, as in this one falls, i.e. is cast into the water, but no other will fall by means of water, for on that day Pharaoh's decree was canceled. And the Gemara explains, and this is what Rabbi Lazar said, what is the meaning of that which is written? And when they shall say to you, seek unto the necromancers and the diviners that chirp, metzafsim, and that mutter, machim, Isaiah 8:19, and the explanation of their chirping and muttering is that these necromancers see, but they do not know what they are seeing. They enunciate, but they do not know what they are enunciating. Although necromancers and diviners do have some insight into the future, they do not see clearly enough to understand what they are actually seeing. And the Gemara applies this idea to Pharaoh. Pharaoh's astrologers saw that the savior of the Jewish people would be stricken by water. Therefore, they arose and decreed, "Every son that is born you shall cast into the river." They thought that their vision indicated that Moses would be killed in the water. Once Yocheved cast Moses into the water, although he was protected in the ark, the astrologers said, we no longer see in the stars anything like that sign we saw as to the downfall of the leader of the Jews by water. And therefore, at that moment, they canceled their decree. But they did not know that what they saw foretold that Moses would be stricken on account of water. Right? What was Moses' downfall? It was in the incident at Meribah where God told him to speak to the rock. Right, this is after Miriam dies, many, many years later, when they're wandering in the wilderness, and Miriam dies, and the well that accompanied the children of Israel after the exodus from Egypt and provided fresh water from them dried up when Miriam died. And then the people started saying, we're gonna die of thirst out here in the desert. And God says to Moses, "Speak to the rock and it will give water." And Moses struck the rock with his staff, which he had been instructed to do at an earlier time, to get water from a rock by striking it. Now, though, God told him, "Speak to the rock," and he strikes the rock in anger because he wants to grieve for his sister who just died, and all the people are moaning and whining and muttering, and what are we going to do, and how are we going to die of thirst? Like after everything that God has done for them and fed them manna for, at this point, years and years and years. Again with the whining, and he's so frustrated with them. And this is really where, he showed himself and the people, he was not going to be the leader to lead them into the promised land. That would fall to Joshua. But at any rate, it was through this incident involving water that Moses was told by God, you will not lead the people into the promised land. You will see it, but you shall not enter it. And that came as a result of this incident involving water. So the necromancers of Egypt foretold something about water would be the downfall of Moses, but they didn't understand what it was. At any rate, they canceled the decree and no more Jewish baby boys were drowned, because you can imagine, since they were slaves in Egypt, drowning all the boys was not a productive way to raise up new slaves. So they didn't keep that decree around for long. On account of water at Meribah. And this is what Rabbi Chama, the son of Rabbi Hanina, says. What is the meaning of that which is written? These, Hema, are the waters of Meribah, where the children of Israel strove with the Lord, and he was sanctified in them. Numbers 20:13. What does this mean? The verse indicates that these are the waters that the astrologers of Pharaoh saw, and on account of which they erred. They made a mistake. And this is what Moses said. The people among whom I am are 600,000 men on foot, Ragli. And yet you have said, I will give them flesh that they may eat a whole month. Numbers 11:21. And Moses said to the Jewish people, on account of me, which is an alternative meaning of the word Ragli, on account of me, all of you were saved, as the decree to throw all males into the river was canceled on my account. Right? They stopped throwing males into the river, so these are the people who were born from that. And Rabbi Acha Bar Chanina says, that day was actually the sixth day. Rabbi Hanina Bar Papa says that day that Moses was placed in the river was the 21st day of the month of Nisan. The ministering angels said before, that is the seventh day of Passover. And the ministering angels said before the Holy One, blessed be He, Master of the universe, should the one who in the future will say the song at the Red Sea, on this day be stricken? As this was also the date on which the Red Sea would be parted during the salvation of the Exodus. And Rabbi Acha Bar Hanina says that day was actually the sixth day of the month of Sivan. That's Shavuos, when the Torah is given. And the ministering angel said before the Holy One, blessed be He, Master of the universe, should the one who in the future will receive the Torah on Mount Sinai on this day be stricken on this day? As this was also the date on which the Torah was received. So the Gemara asks, granted, according to the one who says that Moses was placed in the water on the 6th of Sivan, you find that there can be 3 months during which Moses was hidden after his birth. As the Master said, Moses died on the 7th of Adar, and Moses was born on the 7th of Adar. And based on this, from the 7th of Adar until the 6th of Sivan is 3 months. which correspond to the 3 months Moses was hidden before being placed in the water. And they're saying, and we know he was saved on that day, but in a sense he was stricken in that was the day that he could have died, right? But according to the one who says that it was on the 21st of Nisan, how can you find that he was hidden for 3 months? It says that she hid him for 3 months. His mom did. And the Gemara answers that year was a leap year in which there were 2 months of Adar. So Moses was hidden most of the first month of the 3, from the 7th of the 1st of Adar when he was born, and most of the last month of the 3, i.e. all of Nisan until the 21st, and the entire middle month, the 2nd Adar. And all this together is considered as 3 months. So the Gemara now discusses the next verse in Exodus. Then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, right? Miriam said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call you a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for you?" And the Gemara asks, and what is different that Pharaoh's daughter would specifically want a nurse of the Hebrew women? Now that Pharaoh's daughter has adopted a baby that she found in the river, why would she go to the Hebrew women for a wet nurse? Maybe she should just, she's Pharaoh's daughter. She can have anything she wants. She might want a fancy Egyptian wet nurse. So the Gemara answers, this teaches that prior to this, they took Moses around to all the Egyptian wet nurses. And he did not agree to nurse from any of them. As he said, shall a mouth that in the future will speak with the divine presence actually nurse something impure? And this is as it is written, whom shall one teach knowledge? And whom shall one make understand the message? Isaiah 28:9. And the prophet is asking, to whom shall God teach the knowledge of the Torah? And to whom shall God make to understand the message of the Torah? The answer is, as the verse continues, them that are weaned from the milk, them that are drawn from the breasts. The conclusion of the verse indicates that the Torah should be taught to one who did not want to nurse from the milk of these Egyptian women. So the verse next states, and Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go. And the maiden, Ha'alma, went and called the child's mother. And Rabbi Lazar says this teaches that she went quickly like a maiden, i.e. with the strength of one of marriageable age, and not as the young child that she was. She was only 6 years old. And Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani says the word Ha'alma is related to the word meaning to hide, le'alem, for she hid her words and didn't tell Pharaoh's daughter that she was bringing the baby's mother. And the next verse states that Pharaoh's daughter said to Yocheved, and Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this, helichi, child away, and nurse it for me, and I will give you your wages. And the woman took the child and nursed it. And Rabbi Chama said of Rabbi Hanina, Rabbi Chama, the son of Rabbi Hanina, says, Pharaoh's daughter is prophesying, and she does not know what she is prophesying, as the word helichi means, this is yours, ha shelichi, i.e., this is your child. And the next part of the verse states, and I will give you your wages, right? So, this is what the beautiful subtext of the story, that Pharaoh's daughter hires Moses' mother to be his wet nurse. So he continues suckling from his own mother, and a wet nurse takes a baby away until it is weaned, So in other words, Moses spends the next several years in his mother's house receiving, the tradition. I mean, it's a baby, but it's Moses. So, it's Moses. So Moses, in those first few years of his life, was hearing his mother sing Jewish songs, speak in Hebrew, light candles, do all the things that Jewish women do. And of course, that had an impact on him. Then, of course, he was ripped out of that home and raised in the palace. But that made a very deep and permanent impression on him. This teaches that with regard to righteous people, not only is it so that God arranges that their lost items are returned to them, right? So if you ever lose an item and find it, you're being rewarded for some righteousness in your life. But he also arranges that they get their wages, as the son of Yocheved was returned to her, and she received payment for nursing him. Now, elsewhere the verse states, I'm almost done, so if you have questions or comments, get them in. Elsewhere the verse states with regard to Miriam, and Miriam the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, took a timbrel in her hand, and all the women went out after her with timbrels and with dances. And the Gemara asks, why is Miriam referred to? And why are we spending all this time on Miriam, by the way? Because the Mishna said that God rewards measure for measure, right? He punishes and rewards measure for measure. And the example that was given in the Mishna of who was rewarded measure for measure was Miriam. So we have an extended discussion to understand who Miriam was. That's all of what we're doing. And Miriam the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, took a timbrel in her hand. And the Gemara asks, why is Miriam referred to as the sister of Aaron? Wasn't she the sister of Moses? You would think that Moses is kind of the star of the story. Why isn't she called Moses' sister, but rather Aaron's sister? They have the same parents, both father and mother. So why is Miriam referred to as the sister of Aaron and not the sister of Moses? And Rav Amram says that Rav says, and some say that Rav Nachman says that Rav says, this teaches that Miriam already prophesied when she was still the sister of only Aaron, meaning before Moses was born. Right? Even at the age of 6, she was a prophet. And as a child, Miriam would say, in the future, my mother will give birth to a son who will save the Jewish people. And once Moses was born, the entire house was filled with light. And her father arose and kissed her on her head. And he said to her, my daughter, your prophecy has been fulfilled. And once they put him into the river, right? They didn't cancel the decree. And now they had to put this baby in a basket in the river. And the father, despairing, arose and gave her a patch on the head. And he said to her, my daughter, where's your prophecy now? And this is as it is written, and his sister stood afar off to know what would be done to him, to know what will be the ultimate resolution of her prophecy. And needless to say, she was a prophet, and her prophecy was fulfilled, and the boy was pulled out of the river by Pharaoh's daughter. That's where we'll pick it up tomorrow at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. Let's see if there's any questions or comments on Sotah 12. Sharon. The Torah states that the man of Levi married the woman of Levi and they had a son, and that son was Moses. It doesn't mention the prior two children there at all. My understanding is that this is what was the genesis of this midrash. Sharon is saying that the genesis of this midrash is what was going on with Miriam and Aaron before Moses was born, and sort of these beautiful details filled in by the sages. And Sharon is saying that the zeroah, the shank bone on the Seder plate, is also likened to the forearm zeroah of Basya. Oh, beautiful connection, right? Because on the Seder plate, right, we have the shank bone, which reminds us of the Korban Pesach, right, the lamb that we would bring when the temple was standing as the Passover sacrifice. But it's also here linked to that, miraculously extending arm of Basya. But remember that lesson, right? When there's an impossible situation, you need a solution, but it looks like it's impossible. Don't despair. Don't give up. Just take the first step anyway, and then the solution might present itself once you get into it. So Joseph says, is there any biblical or rabbinic precedent for a man staying celibate? Has any rabbi decided to stay single because of the wickedness in his generation? Right, so Joseph is keying on this idea that Moses' father decided to divorce his wife and no longer procreate because the children were going to be thrown into the river. Right, now he had already fulfilled. The Torah hadn't been given yet, right? But we have this teaching that the patriarchs and matriarchs, maybe by extension Moses' family, were fulfilling the Torah anyway, right? And so and plus, this commandment was given to all of mankind, right? Peru urevu, to be fruitful and multiply. And we saw elsewhere that that's a command given to men. Women don't have the commandment to procreate because childbirth is dangerous, but men do. And then the Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai disagree. When have you fulfilled that? One says when you have 2 sons, the other says when you have a son and a daughter. At least replacement number of children. And Yocheved and Amram already had a boy and a girl, as we've been discussing. And so he said, no more. I don't want to have another son who's now going to be thrown into the river. So Joseph is asking, was there any, some kind of a precedent in the literature, rabbinic literature, about somebody who says he doesn't want to have children because the world is terrible or because the world is wicked? I'm not aware of such a precedent. There's obviously like all kinds. We could have a whole class on that subject. But one thing that we see, if you think about the journey of the Jewish people over these last 3,300 years, right? And as we read on Passover in the Haggadah, that in every generation they rise up to destroy us, but the Holy One delivers us from their midst. But, there was a Holocaust, there were pogroms, there was the Spanish Inquisition, and the Spanish expulsion, right? It wasn't just throwing the Jews out and you go find another country to live in. I mean, there was so much torture and killing. There was the destruction of the first temple, the destruction of the second temple. The Greeks attacked us, the Romans, Nebuchadnezzar, and the Babylonians, the Persians. I mean, in every age, there were just places and times when Jews suffered terribly. And you could easily see where in that generation people might have said, I don't want to bring children into this world. It's too awful. But thank God that did not become a widespread thought, because we have a faith, that God has a purpose for all of this history, and all of the darkness is for a reason. And from the greatest darkness, light will always emerge. And we're a very hopeful and optimistic people looking forward to the day when Mashiach will come. And the purpose of all these millennia of suffering will be revealed. And we'll see what this was all headed toward. And against that hope, we keep bringing children into the world, thank God. That's what I've got for us tonight. And with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Pacific. Have a great night and a good